Why is IWC so expensive? Hi everyone and welcome to Shaluso, and yes, today we are asking the question, why are IWC watches so expensive? Last year when IWC introduced the new Ingenieur, it really had a lot of people scratching their heads as to why the watch was approaching nearly $14,000. Well, it shouldn't be any secret that watch prices in general across almost all brands have been going up, some more than others though. But to really understand why or how a watch got to its current price, you need to look at what they were doing in the past, because a lot of the times it's not so much a case of what they're doing today that's how they got to their point, it's what they were doing for years or even decades before. Rolex is a great example. There was a time where a Submariner would cost you maybe like $3,000 at retail, whereas now that is nearly a $10,000 watch. So let's take a look back at what IWC was doing just a few years ago with their most iconic model, the Pilot. Luxury, and by extension luxury pricing, is all about the details, and IWC with the Pilot really showed their level of attention to detail in many ways a lot better than a lot of other companies. Starting with the dial and just embracing this concept of being a pilot's watch. For one thing, we need to understand that the reason why pilots used to need analog watches in addition to all of their instruments was that they needed a second opinion to corroborate what they were seeing on their instruments. They ran the risk of, if an instrument was faulty, they didn't have a backup, they wouldn't know things like how much fuel they had left. That's one of the major reasons why most pilots' watches will measure hours, not just minutes and seconds, because that's what they would use to measure their fuel burn. They would also use the minutes to determine the distance between waypoints. These things were essentially a backup for the pilot. Now, of course, these days everything's digitized, it's much more reliable, but when you look at the IWC Pilot, they made sure to include these, and they also made sure to separate the running seconds, which is indicated with the red seconds hand, so that pilots wouldn't be confused with what registers they need to look at if they're using it as a reference. The other nice detail on the dial of this particular model is the date. Now, it's not strange for IWC pilots to feature a day-date. They are, after all, mostly based on 7750s, especially when we're looking at these older versions. But this one takes things one step further in terms of just the design and the concept on the dial, and that is by using an open date that allows you to see both the day coming before and the day coming after, styled a little bit like an altimeter. This is what pilots would use to understand the elevation of the plane at any given point. These are just two little details that show how IWC is already embracing a concept, and that's before we start stretching things out to the case. 43 millimeters combined with that dial makes already for a very legible watch. But it's no coincidence that this is a watch that has barely any polished surfaces. It has a few nice little bevels just to give it a little bit more shape and definition, but most of this is satin finished, and that is a practical concern. The idea is you don't want these reflective surfaces all over your watch to blind you or distract you when you're flying. So it has that matte tactical look, bearing that in mind. But there's one more detail to the case that's even more interesting, and that is that the gaskets in the case are actually set up so that if there's a sudden drop in pressure, the glass doesn't pop out. This is something that, while yes, it probably sacrifices some water resistance, shows that again, IWC paid attention to the details. This is a pilot's watch. They're much more concerned about the glass popping out than huge amounts of water coming in. Because if you have that much water coming into your cockpit, you have bigger problems. And of course, this being a pilot's watch with so many instruments around you, that does tend to generate the potential for magnetic fields. So for good measure, IWC also made this watch anti-magnetic. Again, conscious of the fact that this is a pilot's backup, so they need to make sure they can rely on it, especially if other systems fail. And then we expand outwards from the case onto the bracelet. Now, not every IWC Pilot comes on a bracelet, but those who do show exactly why IWC is so incredibly good when it comes to attention to detail and over-engineering. I love pretty much every IWC bracelet that I encounter, and this is no exception. In terms of embracing the Pilot's concept, much like the case, it's fully satin finished. The 5-link bracelet is very comfortable and flexible, but what I want to highlight here is, again, this features IWC's push system where you can actually take out every single link with just a toothpick or the tool that comes with the watch. This isn't something where you need to use screwdrivers and a block and a punch, but then you get to the clasp and you get what is still, in my view, the best clasp. You can press the IWC button and the bracelet will extend, or you can push it inwards and then it can contract. You can do this on the wrist or off the wrist. The idea is that it's the attention to detail, and that's what this entire video is about. IWC is a company that has such fastidious attention to detail that engineers every single aspect of their watches and has done so for so long that that's why they're at that point where they can command the prices that they do. They front-loaded the value, they front-loaded the effort, so now yes, they are cashing in on it. For those of us who are interested in buying their watches, this is where pre-owned offers a huge opportunity because watches like this IWC Pilot can still be got for less than 5,000 euros compared to a new one. Obviously the downside, and one area where I haven't mentioned, is on the movement side. The newer IWC watches have in-house movements, whereas this uses a 7750 that IWC would have stripped down and rebuilt to make it to their specifications. But the movement side really could merit its own video. What I really want to highlight though is what makes IWC special, and we've seen it time and time again, whether it's the Ingenieur, whether it's the Aqua Timer. Almost all of IWC's watches have had a history of just being so over-engineered that you get so much more than just what's showing you the time. But does all this justify what they're charging for their watches today? Well, that's down for you to decide, and in my view at least, it does vary on a model by model basis. I think some of them are worth it, some of them maybe they're reaching a bit, but I definitely think they've earned the right to try and reach a little bit. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and of course if you like this video then make sure you like it and share it. If you want to see more pictures and infographics about watches then make sure you follow me on Instagram at Shaluso. If you want to see more videos of watches then you can subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell as well so you know when the next video comes out. If you want to see more IWC content then I have a full IWC playlist just for you. But thanks for joining me on this quick exploration of why IWC is so expensive, and we'll catch you on the next video.